Well, good morning, everyone. Sally Munger here, but I wanted to introduce Carrie because I have, as I was sharing with her, I believe the record for correspondence on a forum is shared with Carrie and me today because we just had to go back and forth, but we finally got it all put together. And I am so pleased that she's here today to talk to us about this very important topic that everyone needs to think about as we age and think about our future plans and what we want to have happen when we pass on. So I'm glad to have Carrie here. She's had a very close experience with this, which is what got her interested in it. And so I'm happy to introduce Carrie Framsted, who is part of Compassion and Choice, who will tell us about what she's doing in that area and what their possibilities are for possible legislation as well. So over to you, Carrie, then.
Thank you, Sally. That was a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I could not have said it better. I'm going to have to pen you in on some of this stuff that in your referencing as to why it's important for everyone to be engaging in these conversations. I totally agree. So thank you so much. Yes, Sally and I have been in correspondence for, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of a year. And I am very pleased to be able to be invited to your forum this morning. I want to also thank Brett for his technology assistance in making all of this happen, because it is far from any skill set that I have. As Sally was mentioning, my name is Carrie Framsted. Good morning. And I live up in Grand Marais. I have for almost a little over 2 years. And I got introduced to the End of Life Options Act in the March of 2020. It was right after my wife had passed away in February, and I saw an article in the Star Tribune. We used to live in the cities, and that I hadn't had any conversation or thought during my wife's bout with cancer about compassion and choices and end of life. We were very overwhelmed, as you can imagine, with our new reality that we were facing at the time. But when I saw that article in the paper, I was very energized to learn more about it. Had the opportunity before COVID closed everything down to meet with my representative, Bob Eklund, down at the Capitol. And that started off a couple of years of connecting with him and a good outcome, which I'll share with you in a few minutes. But so I got in contact with Compassion and Choices. As I mentioned, I started volunteering with them, did my story with them, videoed with them. And this past fall, the Compassion and Choices started up a group called Action Groups across the state. There's 3 of them, and I'm a co-leader for the Actions team here in northern Minnesota. I think we might be changing our name to the Arrowhead Action Team. I think that has a nice ring to it, makes a good connection. And we meet once a month on the second Wednesday at 6 o'clock for an hour for a Zoom meeting. And the intention of this group is to gain more traction in our communities, education and awareness. It's a real grassroots level of addressing the issues, the needs, the concerns, the awareness, the language needed regarding what End of Life Options Act really is for individuals, the empowerment that it allows individuals when facing imminent death. And it's our opportunity to connect with others in the community and with churches such as yourself, newsletters, articles, and reaching out to our legislators and senators to bring it to them to this attention of the need for their support and help with supporting what their constituents are asking and wanting in the state. Compassion and Choices did a survey in 2016 that proudly showed that 68% of Minnesotans agreed that an individual facing their imminent death should have access to options on how their end of life can play out. It was equal across all demographics, political affiliations, religious affiliations, education levels. Um, and I'm very proud of sharing that statistic because I feel very certain that in the coming years, hopefully not too many, the state of Minnesota will bring into law the ability for an individual at the time of approaching their death that they can, with their physician and their family members, plan how their death is going to play out to have a good death. I was sharing with Sally earlier that Minnesota is one of the states that does have currently a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate that would be addressing the legalization for the state for end of life options. Um, so we are currently working with our legislators to gain more awareness and to have them sign on these bills. And as I was mentioning, I've been networking with Representative Eklund for the Arrowhead region regarding his support. And it's taken some time to bring him around to understanding, getting education, sharing articles in the paper about people who are dealing with death and dying. And we were pleasantly surprised in January when a few of us, a family in Ely and myself and somebody else here in Grand Marais that met with Eklund on a Zoom meeting. And he shared that he supported this bill and that he would be signing on, and he has already currently signed on to support the bill. We've also had, yeah, clap, clap, clap. I like the clapping. I also have great news to also share that in the past couple weeks, we have had meetings with Representative Liz Olson, and I think it's Jennifer Schultz in some of the districts down in Duluth, and they also have agreed to sign on and support this legislation as well. So that has really given us a big lift, I would have to say, for our Arrowhead team to feel that there's been some legal traction for us. It's really been helpful. And but as I mentioned, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We have many other politicians to be reaching out to and other community agencies and organizations. Our work is just beginning, I'd like to think, but these recent accomplishments have really been helpful. Early gift for me for sure for the year. So some of the elements developed into the legislation for passing such a bill started 25 years ago in the state of Oregon. They've been the first state in the United States that has allowed this bill to be it passed and to allow this right for its citizens to engage in their end of life planning. Currently, there are 10 states in the District of Columbia who have legalized this legislation. And this past year in 2021, New Mexico was the latest state to join. The legislation specifically has really stringent requirements in order for a person to have access to end-of-life medications. And those requirements begin with first being adult and a resident of the state of Minnesota. You also have to be coordinating with your family physician. You're likely in hospice care, and you will end up needing to be approved by 2 independent physicians that are concurring that you do indeed have a terminal illness and your life is within 6 months of living. You also have to be able to go through a mental health assessment, so the capacity for you to make this decision is clear, that you're of sound mind, that you're not being pressured into this decision, also has to be taken into account. And then lastly, you also need to be able to ingest the medication yourself. So those real strict parameters are in place, and it's a lengthy process to get approved, as it should be. This isn't anything to be taken lightly. or to feel like somebody could be forced into it or has been giving wrong information. It's a lengthy process, and the American Medical Association is neutral in their decision in end of life options. They're not pro, they're not against, they're just really neutral, and they're neutral from the standpoint of their basic requirement is that these standards, these requirements to be approved are in place and followed within each state. And so that I feel like that says a lot from our medical society, our medical community, that in general, as a larger entity, that they are not against it. A little housekeeping, I forgot to mention that any questions that you might have, please go ahead and put them in the chat section. I will be talking for, I don't know, half hour, if I can make it that long, and would really, really be interested in hearing from you and the questions that you have, because each time I talk about this, with in an event like this or what have you, there are a lot of really good questions that people have. So back to the law and its access, it's generally utilized by individuals, as I mentioned, that are in hospice with less than 6 months to live. And those diseases are typically diseases of cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, ALS, some COPD cases, some heart diseases, a smaller percentage. And it does not include dementia, understandably, because the diagnosis of dementia is really, there's a long continuum. There really isn't specific material or data that would qualify you for that one specific element, which is 6 months of death. So that's generally always a question that people come ask is dementia would be an included illness and disease for this. I also wanted to share that talking about having this ability to meet with your physician and discuss your healthcare options is a privilege and a private right that every individual gets to share with their physicians. And when someone is facing imminent death and those difficult conversations come into play, a person is shared, as my wife and I were, that palliative care is an option, and palliative care is fabulous. My wife was getting treatment down at Mayo, and our experience with the palliative care specialist there was really wonderful. It was nice to be able to talk with somebody that wasn't directly related to oncology and treatment and all the labs and stuff. You really felt like you were sitting down and having a easy conversation about anything that we had questions about. And this individual, he was very helpful for us for understanding the complicated elements of her medications, for the medication specifically following her chemotherapy treatments. And I'd also share that hospice is also an area that your physician will be talking with you about when you're approaching your end of life. So having those conversations about palliative care and hospice is another strong element of my education awareness, because in our society, we don't talk much or very little about death. Our experiences leading up to death, what we would like to have our own death be like, what our fears are, what our concerns are about it. Our hospice nurses, our hospice care, and our palliative care did a wonderful job helping support us at every turn of our journey that we were on with my wife's cancer. And to me, I feel like the end of life option is just another continuation of that medical care and medical options. It is it's a continuum of care, and it's a standard of care that would be added to like your portfolio of a doctor talking with somebody about a person's needs, wants, and their options. And I know there can be sometimes concern about, how patients can listen to their doctor and what they're going to say and take it that this is a professional. He's telling me what to do. I like to think of it though as more that it's a physician's ability to explore with you all your options. You get to choose your personal choice. Do you want palliative care? Do you want to access hospice care? Can I talk to somebody about our eventual hopeful end of life options act, and how does that work? I think that the ability to have those conversations are so important because the scariness, the anxiety, the grief of just accepting an illness and a disease and going through all the weeks and months and possibly years of treatment options that are thankfully there to extend a person's life when cure isn't a possibility. um, that's a long road. It's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of difficult conversations and painful things to discuss and go through. However, being able to have access to those conversations is just my point. Being able to share and have time to talk with family and your friends about how your life is and your quality of life and your fears about dying. Um, when that doesn't happen, you can just imagine the difficulties and the panic and the anxiety when somebody is in those last days of living. The wish, I wished I'd have said this. I wish we could have talked about this. It's enormous. It's overwhelming, the elements that you wish you could have done and would have said. I still have it today with my wife. So being able to have access to this medical practice, this medical procedure would alleviate lots of anxieties and fears for people. The not knowing how my wife was going to die, like when she was going to die, was very, well, we just didn't talk about it. We didn't deal with it. We were just trying to deal with day to day supporting and loving each other. I know that there are some hospice nurse through a connection of mine felt that all the resources that hospice can provide is enough, that we are supporting those who are dying with hospice. And I can't agree more. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have access 24 hours a day to hospice. However, 20% of people dying die in pain, that our advances in medical care cannot reach everybody's level of pain. My wife was one of those. She had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And her two wishes were pain management and quality of life. And she didn't have any of those the last 2 weeks of her life. She had a port, obviously, for her chemotherapy, and she had a dilaudid pump added to that port when hospice got connected with us. And obviously, she was taking morphine, and the amounts of the morphine obviously were increasing over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks to a month and a half. And you have a dilaudid pump, and it's just like the chemo pump. It just slowly gives you enough of the painkiller. And then you do have the ability to, for a specific periods of time, to access a little bit more with an additional button that you can push. But there's a limit that you can be accessing it. And the nurses were coming in and conversing with their physician about how to increase the amount of Dilaudid that she could get. And they were just always chasing and trying to keep ahead of her level of pain. And their concern was that her liver, because the cancer was in her liver as well, that it would affect her ability to process the pain medication, and that it also might affect her ability to get any benefit from the pain medication. So it's a reality. Not everybody goes quietly in their sleep, and her last 24 hours, her last 8 hours were excruciating. So people suffer at the end of their life. They're full of anxiety and uncertainty. And I feel that this law would allow people to have a better quality of life in their last weeks and months of their life, because they already have discussed how they're going to die, when they're going to die, who they're going to die with, and everyone else gets to come and speak to them, hold them, share what they meant to you. Because in the last 2 weeks of my wife's life here on this earth, you couldn't communicate to her that way. And we're always filled with, what should I say? Should I say it now? I don't want to intrude. The family's there. I mean, she filled the room at her celebration of life. And it would have been a beautiful thing to have had everyone be able to tell her what she meant to them before she died. She was 55 years old and diagnosed in end of June, with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and she died February 15th of 2020. So I have her anniversary this Tuesday. I've gone down that long road and journey of grief, and I had grief support through Mayo Hospice, because it was COVID. You couldn't meet with people. You couldn't see a therapist. It was a horrible time to have to go through what I went through. But fortunately, her celebrations of life service was before COVID hit and everything was closed down. I'm grateful for that, because it was a wonderful time to be able to share her special day, her celebration of her life, with all her friends and family and coworkers that came, and students. She was a middle school health teacher, the 7th and 8th graders. They're a wild bunch, and she loved them, and she cared for them deeply. And she loved the outdoors. She was a state of Minnesota cross country and 2-mile champion cross country runner. So she knew about managing pain and exercising. She did the low pit in the city. She did the what's the big ski race coming up in Hayward, the Berkey Binder. She ran marathons and half marathons. And so watching her not be able to walk at the end and to go outside and walk with the dogs, be stuck in a bed and couldn't move, was real painful. She had a very strong heart. It took a long time for her to die, and it was a horrible thing to experience. I so much wished I could have been able to have had the moment to say goodbye to her, when I could look her in the eyes and we could talk about our memories and our history and our love for each other. If I could have one thing back, I'd like that.